The slap came so fast I didn't even have time to react. My glasses flew off my face, shattering against the polished ballroom floor. For a second, there was only silence. 130 people, frozen mid-laughter, mid-drink, mid-smile. All of them staring at me, the poor old woman who had just been struck across the face by her own daughter-in-law. The sting on my cheek burned, but it was nothing compared to the fire in my chest. Juliet's eyes blazed with rage and triumph as she hissed. "That's what you get for being so selfish." Her voice cut through the heavy air like glass. "A woman your age doesn't need so much space." My fingers trembled as I crouched down, searching for the broken pieces of my glasses. The world blurred, not only because I couldn't see, but because I couldn't believe what had just happened. Not one person moved to help me. Some turned away awkwardly, pretending to adjust their dresses or refill their glasses. Others whispered, hungry for drama. But no one defended me. And then I looked at my son. Ethan. My only child. The boy I raised on love and sleepless nights, who I thought would always protect me. He stood there motionless, eyes down, hands in his pockets, as if I were invisible. "You're not welcome here anymore," Juliet continued, smoothing the perfect folds of her wedding gown. "Ethan and I need our privacy to start our new life. Your apartment would be perfect for us while we shop for something better." Her words oozed poison wrapped in silk. That was the moment something inside me broke. Or maybe, something inside me finally woke up. For months I had endured her condescending remarks about my old-fashioned clothes, my ancient car, my sad little life. I had smiled through every insult, every jab, every pitying glance. But this was the final straw. I rose slowly, every muscle in my body trembling, but my spine straightened like steel. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't bother to hide them. Let them see. Let them all see. I wasn't ashamed anymore, they were. That slap wasn't humiliation. It was revelation. My name is Aurora Hughes, and for 68 years, I've lived quietly, maybe too quietly. To most people, I'm just a widow who works 3 days a week at a small flower shop. A woman who drives a 10-year-old sedan, wears old shoes, and clips coupons. A woman who fades into the background at parties, and speaks softly so others can feel louder. That's exactly what I wanted them to think. Because people don't envy what they underestimate. For decades, I built a life around discretion. My late husband, Robert, and I made that decision long ago, to live modestly, to protect what we had, to never show the full hand we were holding. We told no one that Robert's office job was just a cover for the small empire he'd quietly built, investments, properties, accounts spread across states, and even countries. When he died, I inherited not just his fortune, but his philosophy: visible wealth attracts greed. Invisible wealth grants freedom. And tonight, standing there with a handprint on my cheek, I realized how right he'd been. As I turned to leave, whispers followed me like ghosts. "Poor thing," I heard someone murmur. "She looks so fragile." "The bride's right," another voice said. "That woman can't take care of herself anymore. She should be in a retirement home," someone else added. Every word was a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. But I kept walking, my heels clicking against the marble floor, each step slower, heavier, more deliberate. The chandeliers glimmered above like judgmental stars. When I reached the exit, the night air hit my face, cold, sharp, cleansing. I took a deep breath, pulled my old phone from my purse, and dialed a number I hadn't called in more than a year. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. "Carlos," I said, my voice low but firm. "It's Aurora. I need you to come to the Royal Oaks Ballroom immediately." Bring the documents. Yes, those documents. It's time. There was silence on the line. Then his steady, careful voice. Are you sure, Mrs. Hughes? Once we do this, there's no going back. I looked over my shoulder, through the glass doors, at the glittering scene inside. Juliet was laughing with her bridesmaids, the picture of innocence. Ethan stood by her side, nodding, pretending everything was fine. My chest tightened, but my resolve did not waver. I'm sure, I said. 30 minutes, Carlos. No more. When I hung up, my reflection in the glass startled me. For the first time in years, I saw the real me, the woman who had loved, lost, and endured. The woman who had sacrificed everything for her son. And the woman who was about to take it all back. I walked across the parking lot, the night swallowing the echoes of my heels. The golden lights from the ballroom spilled onto the pavement, painting my shadow long and thin. I sat inside my old car, locked the doors, and waited. 30 minutes. That's all it would take for their world to change forever. As I sat there, I let the memories flood in, memories I had buried under politeness and restraint. The first time I met Juliet. The first warning signs. The first time she called me Aura instead of Mom. It had been 2.5 years ago. Ethan came to visit, his smile bright and nervous. Mom, he'd said, I want you to meet someone special. And there she was, Juliet. All polished charm and designer perfume. Her eyes scanned my modest apartment like a real estate agent appraising a fixer-upper. How cozy, she murmured, glancing at my thrift store curtains and second-hand furniture. Ethan didn't notice her tone. Love blinded him, or maybe ego did. Dinner that night had been a quiet disaster. She barely touched the food I'd spent all afternoon preparing, pushing the plate away with a delicate frown. When I asked about her family, she gave short answers, but she had plenty of questions for me. Especially about money. How do you manage on a widow's pension? She'd asked, pretending to sound sympathetic. It must be hard to get by on so little. Her words stung, but I smiled politely. I've learned to live within my means, I said. If only she'd known. From that moment on, every visit from Juliet was a test of patience. She'd comment on my furniture, my clothes, my car, always under the guise of concern. Aura, you should move to a smaller place, she'd said once. You can't maintain such a big apartment at your age. Ethan and I are thinking of having kids soon. We'll need more space. That was 3 months ago. I had smiled, nodding politely, but inside, I was taking notes. Because I had seen that look before, the look of someone who sees opportunity, not family. One afternoon, while Ethan was in the bathroom, I caught Juliet whispering on the phone. Yes, Mom, she said softly. His mother's apartment is in a super expensive area. If I can convince her to move to a smaller place, we could live there for a while. She's so naive, she'll probably even thank us for helping her. I never forgot that sentence. It became the moment everything changed. From then on, I played my role, the fragile widow, the harmless mother, the easy target. But behind every gentle smile, I was watching, calculating, preparing. Now, as I sat in my car in the dark, waiting for Carlos, I thought of all the years I had spent protecting my family's secret fortune. I had always believed in discretion, in kindness. But that kindness had been mistaken for weakness. They thought they could take everything from me. What they didn't know was that I had already taken precautions. Headlights appeared at the far end of the parking lot. Carlos. I straightened up, wiping the last trace of tears from my face. This was it. The beginning of the end. By the time the clock struck midnight, the people inside that glittering ballroom would finally learn who Aurora Hughes really was. And when they did, they would understand the true meaning of regret. Carlos's car came to a smooth stop right beside mine. The headlights cut through the darkness, painting silver streaks across my trembling hands. He stepped out, tall and calm in his grey suit, the same way he'd been every time Robert and I trusted him with our most delicate secrets. "Mrs. Hughes," he said softly, closing the car door. "Are you completely sure about this?" His voice was steady, professional, but I caught the concern beneath it. "Once we go in there, there's no turning back." I looked toward the ballroom one last time. Through the tall glass windows, I could see them all still celebrating, the laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, Juliet's white dress shining under the chandeliers. She was radiant. Not with love, but with victory. She truly believed she'd won. I straightened my back, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in years. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said quietly. "It's time they meet the real Aurora Hughes." Carlos gave a short nod and opened his briefcase. "Then let's proceed." He handed me several documents, pages that held the power to rewrite everything. The first one, an order to suspend all financial transfers I'd been making to Ethan's accounts. The second, a notice of lease cancellation for the apartment they were currently living in, the one I'd secretly been paying for. The third, a letter to the Royal Oaks Ballroom, notifying them that the remaining payment for the wedding would be withdrawn by midnight due to breach of moral contract. Each paper felt heavier than the last. I had spent my whole life protecting my family. Now, I was about to dismantle the illusion I had built to keep them safe. Carlos looked at me as I signed each document with a shaking hand. "Mrs. Hughes," he said softly, "I've seen many things in 30 years. But what you're doing takes courage most people don't have." I smiled faintly. "It's not courage, Carlos. It's clarity. For years, I mistook silence for peace. But silence only feeds the wolves." When the last signature was done, he gently closed the folder. "Everything is in place. Once we walk in, they'll receive the notifications. Their accounts will be frozen by morning." I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "Then let's give them a wedding night to remember." As we walked back toward the ballroom, the cold air brushed against my skin, and for a moment I almost felt free. I wasn't the fragile widow anymore. I was something else, something sharper. When the glass doors opened, the sound hit me like a wave, laughter, music, the clinking of champagne flutes. The band had just started playing an upbeat tune. The celebration was in full swing. Every step I took echoed against the marble floor. Conversations quieted. One by one, the guests turned. Faces I had known for years, friends of Ethan's, co-workers, distant relatives, all of them stared as if seeing a ghost return from the dead. Juliet was the first to notice me. Her perfectly painted smile faltered for a split second, then she composed herself. "Well," she said loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear, "look who decided to join us again. Couldn't stay away, huh?" Her voice dripped with mockery. I ignored her and walked straight toward the center of the room. Carlos followed silently, his expression unreadable. When I stopped beneath the chandelier, I turned slowly to face the crowd. "Good evening," I began. My voice carried farther than I expected. "I know I wasn't on the program tonight. But since this celebration involves me more than you realize, I think it's only fair that I say a few words." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Juliet laughed lightly, trying to regain control. "Aurora, really, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I interrupted, my tone calm but firm. "After all, what's a wedding without a little honesty?" That silenced her. I turned to look at Ethan. He looked pale, uncomfortable, like a child caught doing something shameful. Ethan, I said softly, you always told me marriage was about love, respect, and trust. But tonight, I learned it can also be about greed, deceit, and betrayal. He flinched. Mom, please, not here. Where else, my dear? I smiled sadly. You chose to humiliate me in front of everyone. The least I can do is return the courtesy. Gasps echoed around the room. Juliet's mother frowned, her hand tightening around her wine glass. Mrs. Hughes, perhaps it would be better if we talked privately. Oh, I'm sure you'd prefer that, I said, my voice sharp as glass. But tonight isn't about your comfort. I looked directly at Juliet. Her perfect posture stiffened, her eyes narrowing with growing unease. You see, Juliet, I continued, I know why you married my son. And it wasn't for love. It was for location, property, and convenience. A murmur ran through the guests. Juliet's face flushed red. That's ridiculous. You're delusional. Maybe you should be in that retirement home after all. Her words might have hurt once. But not anymore. Do you know what I find fascinating? I said evenly. You spent so much time calling me poor, outdated, and irrelevant, yet every luxury in your life was paid for by me. That drew a stunned silence. Even the band stopped playing. Juliet blinked, confusion flickering into panic. What are you talking about? Carlos stepped forward and handed me the folder. I opened it slowly, deliberately, like an actress revealing the final act of a play. Let me make this simple, I said, my voice steady. For 3 years, I have been the invisible hand behind your lives. The apartment you live in, I paid the rent. The car you drive, I covered the loans. The credit card bills you couldn't manage, I cleared them. Even this very wedding, I paused, letting the weight of the words settle, was made possible because I quietly paid the deposit you couldn't afford. Gasps and murmurs filled the air. Ethan's eyes widened, his face turning ghostly pale. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying, I said softly, that everything you own, everything you've shown off tonight, exists because I allowed it to. Juliet shook her head in disbelief, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. You're lying. You're just trying to embarrass us. Carlos raised a paper. I'm her financial advisor. Every word she's said is true. I have the records here, including the transactions made directly to your accounts. The color drained from Juliet's face completely. She glanced desperately at Ethan, but he was frozen, his mouth slightly open, words failing him for the first time in his life. I turned back to the guests. Some of you whispered earlier that I should be in a retirement home. That I'm fragile, helpless. But let me tell you something. I took a deep breath. I am not fragile. I am not helpless. I have simply been patient. And tonight, my patience ends. A hush fell over the room, so deep you could hear the champagne bubbles fizzing in abandoned glasses. Juliet tried to speak again, but I raised a hand. Oh, and Juliet, one more thing. The payment for this wedding. It's been cancelled. Her mouth dropped open. What? She gasped. By morning, Carlos added calmly, the Royal Oaks management will receive notice that the deposit was withdrawn. You'll need to provide full payment by noon tomorrow, or they'll revoke your reservation and pursue legal action for breach of contract. The crowd erupted in whispers. Juliet's father stood abruptly, face red with fury. This is outrageous, he shouted. You can't do this to my daughter. I met his glare with icy calm. Your daughter did it to herself. Juliet turned to Ethan, panic in her eyes. Say something, she hissed. Tell her she can't. But Ethan said nothing. He just stood there, his expression a storm of guilt, confusion and fear. For a brief moment, I saw the little boy he once was, lost, ashamed, desperate for approval. I warned you, Ethan, I said softly, tears threatening to rise again. I told you that love built on lies always collapses. And now, here we are. The guests began murmuring louder, some leaving quietly, others watching as if it were a play. Juliet's face twisted into something feral. You're a bitter, lonely old woman, she spat. You can't stand to see anyone happy. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Happiness built on deceit isn't happiness, Juliet. It's rot dressed in roses. And then I turned toward the door. Enjoy your night, I said quietly. It's the last one you'll have funded by me. I walked out before anyone could speak again. The cold air outside felt different now, cleaner, lighter. Carlos caught up to me. Are you all right? He asked gently. I looked at him, my eyes burning but dry. Yes, I whispered. For the first time in years, I am. As we reached the cars, I turned one last time toward the ballroom. Through the glass, I could see the chaos unfolding, Juliet yelling, Ethan slumped in disbelief, the guests scattering like startled birds. I pressed my hand to my heart. It hurt, God, it hurt, but it was a necessary pain. Because sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to burn down the lie you built. When I woke up the next morning, the sunlight felt different, too bright, almost intrusive. For a moment, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. The same world as yesterday, and yet everything had changed. My phone had exploded overnight. 27 missed calls. 13 unread messages. All from Ethan. I didn't answer. Instead, I made myself coffee, black, strong, bitter, like the truth I'd served last night. As the aroma filled the kitchen, I looked around at my small apartment, the worn furniture, the faded curtains, the pictures of Robert and me smiling in the early years. It was peaceful here. It always had been. And for the first time in years, it finally felt mine again. But even as I tried to enjoy that rare sense of calm, my heart ached. Because no matter how justified my actions had been, there was still pain in knowing my son had stood by and watched me be humiliated. When the doorbell rang at 10:04 a.m., I already knew who it was. I opened the door to find Ethan standing there, disheveled, pale, eyes red from either crying or sleeplessness. Mom, he said softly, can I come in? I hesitated. Then, wordlessly, I stepped aside. He entered slowly, like a man walking into a church after committing a sin. The silence between us was heavy. He looked around the apartment as if seeing it for the first time, really seeing it. The cracked vase by the window, the faded photograph of his father on the shelf, the small details that had once been invisible to him. Finally, he turned to me. I don't even know where to start. How about an apology? I said quietly. He flinched, as if the words were a slap of their own. Mom, I don't know what happened. Everything got out of control last night. Juliet. I raised a hand. Don't you dare blame her for everything. You let it happen. You stood there and did nothing. He swallowed hard. You're right. His voice cracked on the words. You're absolutely right. He sank onto the sofa, head in his hands. I just wanted to make her happy, Mom. She kept saying we needed a place, that it would only be temporary, that it made sense for all of us. I thought you'd understand. Understand. I repeated, the bitterness rising again. That my own son would sell his mother's dignity for convenience. That he'd stand silent while his wife slapped me in public. He looked up, eyes glistening. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't know she'd. She didn't act alone, I interrupted coldly. She had help. From you. He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair. You're right, okay. You're right. I was weak. I let her talk me into things I shouldn't have. But you have to understand, I've been drowning, Mom. The debts, the stress. I didn't know what else to do. I stared at him for a long moment. You could have asked for help. That's what sons do. They ask. They don't manipulate. He turned away, shame painting his shoulders heavy. I didn't want to disappoint you. That sentence, that single, trembling sentence, cracked something in me. For a second, I saw the little boy he used to be, holding his toy car, promising to be Mommy's protector. And now here he was, a grown man, broken by his own mistakes. I sighed, softer now. Sit down, Ethan. He obeyed, shoulders slumped. Do you know what hurt the most last night? I asked. He shook his head. It wasn't the slap. It wasn't even your silence. It was the fact that I realized you never really knew who I was. You saw me as fragile, poor, pitiful. But I was the one holding everything together. He looked at me, eyes wide with confusion. What do you mean? I rose and walked to the cabinet by the window. From the top shelf, I pulled down a thick brown folder, the same one Joseph had brought me last night. When I placed it on the table, the sound echoed through the quiet room like a gavel striking judgment. What's that? Ethan asked. The truth, I said simply. I opened the folder and began laying out documents one by one. Bank certificates. Property deeds. Investment statements. Rental agreements. All bearing my name. Ethan stared at them, blinking in disbelief. Mom. I don't understand. What is all this? This, I said calmly, is what your father and I built together. Over 40 years of hard work, careful decisions, and discipline. We lived modestly, because we believed true security lives in silence. No one, not even you, knew how much we had. And now, because of that, you and Juliet thought you could take from me. He shook his head slowly, as if trying to wake from a dream. This can't be real. I thought you lived on Dad's pension. That's what everyone thought. I smiled faintly, a sad, tired smile. Your father was never just an office worker. He was an investor. A quiet genius. When he died, he left me everything, and one condition. Ethan frowned. Condition. I reached into the folder and pulled out an envelope sealed with Robert's handwriting, aged, yellowed, familiar. He left you this, I said, handing it to him. Ethan hesitated before tearing it open. His hands shook as he read aloud. My dearest Ethan. If you're reading this, it means your mother has decided you're ready to know the truth. I have spent my life building something meant not for greed, but for stability, a foundation of quiet strength. What we have is not a gift to be flaunted, but a responsibility to be protected. If ever you betray your mother's trust, if you let money or pride blind you, she has my full blessing to take it all away. Because only when you learn the value of integrity will you be worthy of inheritance. Love, Dad. Ethan's voice broke on the last word. He stared at the letter for a long, silent moment before looking up at me, tears streaming down his face. Did he know? He whispered. Did Dad know this would happen? I sighed deeply. He knew people change when money enters the equation. That's why he made me promise to stay silent until the day came when truth was needed. Last night was that day. Ethan covered his face with both hands. God, what have I done? Something unforgivable, I said, my voice soft but firm. But not irreversible. He looked up, hope flickering faintly in his eyes. You mean, you'd forgive me? I didn't say that. I took a deep breath. Forgiveness isn't a gift, Ethan. It's earned. He nodded, his shoulders shaking. I'll do whatever it takes, Mom. I swear. For the first time, I believed he meant it. But there was still one truth he needed to hear. Ethan, I said gently, Juliet isn't who you think she is. He frowned, confused. What do you mean? While you were planning that wedding, I continued, I hired someone to look into her background. She's not just careless with money. She's manipulative, and she's been planning to use you from the start. The debts she claimed were small. They're triple what she told you. And she's been bragging to her friends that marrying you was an investment. He froze, staring at me like he'd been struck. Mom, you're lying. I shook my head. I wish I were. I handed him the investigator's report, the same one that had broken my heart weeks ago. As he flipped through the pages, his face went from disbelief to horror. Photos. Text messages. Bank records. Her emails to a friend about getting the apartment sooner than expected. When he dropped the folder, his hands were trembling. Oh my God, he whispered. All this time. I tried to warn you, I said softly. But you were too in love to listen. He stood abruptly, pacing the small living room, running both hands through his hair. She used me. She destroyed everything. I nodded. Yes. But only because you let her. He turned to me then, his eyes red, his face pale. What do I do now? I hesitated before answering. You learn. You start from nothing. And maybe, one day, you'll understand that everything you thought mattered, didn't. The silence stretched between us again. He looked smaller somehow, deflated, the arrogance gone. Mom, he whispered, I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, I said quietly, but you deserve a chance to earn it. That evening, after he left, the apartment felt different. Not empty, but cleansed. The air was lighter. The silence peaceful. I sat by the window, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. Somewhere out there, Juliet was probably realizing her world was collapsing, the frozen accounts, the cancelled wedding bills, the landlord's call. But I didn't feel satisfaction. Only quiet closure. They had wanted my apartment. My space. My life. Now, they had to face the consequences of trying to take it. And yet, deep down, a strange unease lingered. Because as I closed Robert's letter and placed it back in the folder, something caught my eye, a second, smaller envelope tucked behind the papers. It had my name on it. I frowned, curious, and carefully opened it. Aurora. If you ever have to reveal our secret, remember, there's still one more thing you don't know. What I left behind wasn't just money. It was a promise. And soon, you'll understand why. Robert. I froze. My heart began to race. What promise? What else had Robert left behind? For years, I thought I'd known everything. But as the sun disappeared behind the city skyline, I realized my late husband had left me with one final mystery. And it was only beginning to unfold. That night, sleep refused to come. I sat in my armchair by the window, the city lights flickering like restless thoughts. Robert's letter lay open on my lap, the last line echoing in my mind again and again. What I left behind wasn't just money. It was a promise. I traced the ink with my fingertips. His handwriting was so familiar, neat, deliberate, steady. It felt like hearing his voice again, a whisper from beyond time. A promise. Robert was a man of logic, not riddles. Every word he ever wrote had purpose. So what could he have meant by that? I looked at the folder again. Beneath the investment papers, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a small brass key taped to the back cover. My pulse quickened. There was a tag attached, R.H. Office, 1978. Office, I murmured. The word unlocked an old memory. When Robert and I were first married, before his office job became a cover for his investment work, he used to rent a small workspace on the east side of town, a quiet building he said helped him think clearly. I hadn't been there in over 30 years. After he passed, I assumed it had long been sold or demolished. But if Robert left this key, maybe it still existed. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Joseph, I said softly when he answered. I need your help again. By morning, the sky was grey and heavy with clouds. Joseph met me in front of an old brick building on Birch Avenue, the same place I'd driven past hundreds of times without realizing it was still standing. The paint was peeling, and the windows were covered in dust, but the brass number plate near the door read clearly, 78. This place looks like it's been frozen in time, Joseph muttered, adjusting his cap. Are you sure this is the right address? I held up the key. Only one way to find out. The key slid into the old lock with surprising ease. A faint click, and the door creaked open. The smell hit me first, dust, paper, and something faintly metallic, like old ink. Inside, sunlight filtered through grimy blinds, illuminating a room untouched for decades. Stacks of boxes lined the walls, labeled with faded handwriting, projects, records, contracts, 1983. On the far side stood Robert's old wooden desk, the one I hadn't seen since the early years of our marriage. For a moment, I just stood there, unable to breathe. It felt like stepping into a memory. Joseph looked around quietly. You sure you're ready for this? I nodded. Whatever he wanted me to find. I have to know. We began opening boxes, one by one. Most were filled with paperwork, financial reports, stock records, old invoices. Nothing unusual. But then, in the bottom drawer of the desk, hidden beneath a false panel, I found a small metal box wrapped in a cloth. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The lock on the box matched the brass key perfectly. Inside, neatly arranged, were several envelopes, each labeled in Robert's handwriting. One caught my attention immediately, to be opened only by Aurora Promise File. I swallowed hard and opened it. Inside was a thick letter and several old photographs. The first photo made my breath catch. It was Robert standing in front of a large, unfamiliar building, smiling beside another man I didn't recognize. Behind them, a sign read, The Hughes Foundation for Children. I frowned. The Hughes Foundation. We'd never had a foundation. At least, I didn't think we had. I unfolded the letter. My dearest Aurora. If you're reading this, it means you've reached a moment when truth is more valuable than peace. You were always the heart of our family, steady, kind, selfless. But I never told you everything. You deserved a life free of worry, so I kept this part of our story hidden. In 1978, I started something in secret, a charitable foundation in our name. It funds education and housing for children who have no families. I didn't tell anyone, not even you, because I wanted the foundation to live independently of our wealth. I wanted it to be our silent legacy, a promise to the world that our love would outlast us both. Every year, the investments I made in your name contributed to it. The interest from our accounts has been quietly sustaining hundreds of children across the country, orphans, runaways, the forgotten. That was the real purpose behind our modest life. The world didn't need to know what we had. The world only needed to feel it. But there's one more thing. Should Ethan ever lose his way, if greed ever blinds him, you'll find in this box a second document, a new will. It names the foundation as the primary heir. Our wealth was never meant to feed greed. It was meant to feed hope. I trust you to decide what's right, my love. Always yours, Robert. My hands shook as I finished reading. Tears blurred the words. Robert, my Robert, had built an entire world of good behind my back, not out of deceit, but out of faith. And he had entrusted me with the power to decide its future. Joseph touched my shoulder gently. Aurora, are you all right? I wiped my eyes, smiling through the tears. He kept his promise. He really did. Beneath the letter, I found another envelope, this one heavier, sealed with red wax. It was labeled simply, Final Will and Testament Robert Hughes. I hesitated, then opened it. The contents were exactly as the letter said. Robert had rewritten his will to ensure that, in the event of moral or legal conflict, everything, the properties, investments, even the company shares, would go directly to the Hughes Foundation for Children. Ethan's name was mentioned only once. My son will inherit only when he learns that love cannot be bought, and loyalty cannot be negotiated. My chest tightened. This wasn't punishment, it was purpose. Robert had built a legacy bigger than any of us. As I held the papers, a quiet certainty filled me. The slap that had humiliated me wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning of Robert's promise coming full circle. That evening, I sat again in my apartment, the documents spread across the table. Outside, the sky was dark and heavy with rain. I called Carlos. Carlos, I said, my voice steady, I found something. Something Robert left behind. He sounded surprised. Something financial. Something more than that, I said softly. A reason. He listened as I told him about the foundation, the will, the promise. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Finally, he said, Mrs. Hughes, do you realize what this means? The value of your estate could sustain that foundation for generations. Yes, I said. But I'm not ready to give up on Ethan just yet. Carlos sighed. You still believe he can change? I believe he must try, I answered. Robert believed in redemption. I have to as well. When I hung up, I felt a strange calm. The storm outside raged, wind rattling the windows, but inside, I felt anchored. A few days later, Ethan came again. He looked even thinner, more worn. Mom, he said quietly, standing in the doorway, Juliet's gone. I nodded. I know. She left a note, he said, handing it to me. It was short and cold. I didn't sign up for this. You can keep your drama and your broke mother. I'm done. Ethan's voice cracked. She took everything from our accounts. What little we had left. I looked at him, sadness softening my anger. Maybe now you'll see what love really costs, when it's bought on credit. He nodded miserably. I deserve this. I placed a cup of tea in his shaking hands. You deserve a lesson. But lessons aren't life sentences. He looked at me, confused. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. Your father left us both something. A foundation. A purpose. It's time you knew what kind of man he really was, and what he left for you to become. Then I handed him the letter. He read in silence, his lips trembling as he whispered the words. When he finished, he sat back, eyes wide, as if seeing the world for the first time. All this time, he murmured. Dad was helping people. Yes, I said softly. Hundreds of them. Children who had no one. He gave them a chance. And now, so can you. Ethan looked up at me, tears streaming down his cheeks. Mom, I don't deserve to be part of this. Maybe not yet, I said gently. But redemption doesn't begin with worthiness. It begins with will. He nodded slowly. What do you want me to do? Work for it, I said simply. Learn what your father stood for. Help the foundation grow. Earn back your name, not through money, but through meaning. He took a deep breath, his eyes wet but determined. I will, he whispered. I promise. I smiled faintly, hearing Robert's words echo in my mind. A promise. That night, I locked the foundation documents back into Robert's old metal box. For the first time since his death, I felt him near, not as a memory, but as a presence. I placed the box on the table, lit a candle beside it, and whispered, "We kept our promise, my love." As the candlelight flickered, the last of my tears fell, not from grief, but from peace. Because I finally understood what Robert had meant. His promise wasn't about money. It was about legacy. About love that extends beyond betrayal. About the power to rebuild, not destroy. And maybe, just maybe, it was about giving a son a second chance to become the man his father always believed he could be. The weeks that followed felt like waking up after a long, painful dream. For the first time in years, the house was filled with purpose again, not noise, not tension, but quiet, steady movement. Ethan had started visiting the foundation every morning. At first, I thought it was guilt driving him, but soon I saw something else, focus. He spent hours sorting through Robert's old files, organizing donation records, meeting volunteers, even repainting the office walls that had been left untouched since the 80s. Each night, he came home with paint stains on his hands and exhaustion in his eyes, but also something I hadn't seen in a long time, peace. Watching him rebuild, piece by piece, reminded me of the boy who once tried to fix his toy airplane with tape and determination. That same stubborn spirit was still there, just buried under years of poor choices. Sometimes, I would visit the foundation myself. The space had changed. The dusty office Robert left behind was now alive with color and movement. Ethan had turned one of the rooms into a study area for underprivileged children. He'd bought second-hand computers, new bookshelves, and even a small kitchen where the volunteers could cook warm meals for the kids. One afternoon, as I watched a group of children laughing around a table, one of them, a little girl with bright brown eyes, came up to me holding a crayon drawing. "Are you Mr. Ethan's mom?" she asked shyly. I smiled. "Yes, I am." She handed me the picture. It was a messy sketch of a big house with the words, "Thank you, Hughes family," written across the top. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. "Do you like it?" she asked. "It's beautiful," I whispered. She smiled proudly and ran back to her friends. For the first time in a long time, I felt something bloom inside me, something fragile and precious. Hope. But redemption never comes without cost. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, my heart stopped. Juliet. She looked different, thinner, paler, her once perfectly styled hair now dull and uneven. But her eyes were the same, sharp, calculating. "May I come in?" she asked softly. Every instinct in me said no. But something about her tone, low, almost pleading, made me hesitate. I stepped aside. "You have 5 minutes." She entered cautiously, her heels clicking against the floor. Her gaze wandered around the apartment, landing on the framed photo of Robert on the mantel. "You know," she said, forcing a smile, I always thought he looked too serious for you. I said nothing. She sighed, her false bravado cracking. Look, I didn't come here to fight. I came to apologize. That caught me off guard. Apologize? She nodded, wringing her hands. I was wrong, Aurora. About everything. About you. About Ethan. I lost control. When the wedding fell apart, I panicked. I didn't know who to blame, so I blamed you. I studied her face carefully. She sounded sincere, but her eyes told another story. They darted around the room like a thief searching for something to steal. Why are you really here, Juliet? I asked quietly. Her lips pressed together. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she exhaled shakily. I need help. There it was. Help. I repeated. Yes, she said, her voice trembling. After the wedding, everything collapsed. The debts, the apartment, the people I owed money to, they are after me. I don't have anywhere else to go. I crossed my arms. And why do you think I'd help you after what you did? She looked down. Because Ethan still loves me. My stomach turned. Ethan doesn't even know who you are anymore. That's not true, she snapped, her mask slipping for a second. He'll always care about me. You think you've turned him against me, but you haven't. He just needs time. I shook my head slowly. Juliet, you had everything, and you threw it away. Ethan's finally finding peace. Don't drag him back into your chaos. She clenched her fists, her voice rising. You think you're so righteous, don't you? Hiding behind your money, pretending to be some saint. But you're no better than me, Aurora. You just play your cards quieter. I stared at her, my pulse quickening. You should leave. Her lips curved into a cold, thin smile. You know what's funny? You think you've buried the past. But I know something about Robert. Something you clearly don't. The air shifted. I stepped closer, my voice steady but low. What are you talking about? She smirked. I guess he wasn't as perfect as you thought. Maybe you should ask why he had a second account under another name. My heart skipped a beat. You're lying. Am I? She whispered. Robert Hughes, or should I say Richard Hale? Recognize that name. The sound of it sent a chill through me. Richard Hale, a name I hadn't heard in decades. Back in the early years of our marriage, Robert used it once when signing a contract for confidentiality reasons. He said it was just a business alias. Juliet saw the flicker of recognition on my face and smiled triumphantly. I did my research, she continued. I found files. Investments. Transactions under that alias. Big ones. Offshore accounts. If I had those documents, the foundation would crumble. People would think your perfect husband was hiding money overseas. My voice trembled. What do you want? Half, she said simply. Half of what's left. Cash. No questions asked. I stared at her, speechless. You're blackmailing me. She shrugged. Call it compensation. For emotional damages. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then, slowly, I turned toward the fireplace, my mind racing. Robert's secret alias. It couldn't be what she thought. He wasn't a criminal. He was careful, methodical. There had to be another reason. But Juliet, she wasn't bluffing. Finally, I faced her again. Get out. Her smile vanished. What? You heard me. Get out of my home. If you ever come near me or my son again, I'll have you arrested. Her eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare. I stepped closer, my voice cold and sharp as a blade. Try me. We stood there in silence, two women, bound by the same man, both shaped by different kinds of love and loss. Finally, she grabbed her purse, muttering under her breath. You'll regret this, Aurora. Everyone hides something. And then she was gone. That night, I couldn't shake her words. Richard Hale. The name echoed through my head long after the door slammed shut. I went to the drawer where I'd kept Robert's documents and began searching. Every paper, every file, every record. And then, hidden at the very bottom of the metal box, I found it, a small black notebook labeled R.H. Private. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, figures, and lists of donations. Each one detailed money sent to the foundation, but not from our accounts. From his alias. And all the transactions were directed to one source, a small orphanage in Chicago. On the last page, a single line stood out. Richard Hale, my name for the man I was before Aurora made me whole. This account funds the children she'll never know she saved. Tears blurred the ink. It wasn't a secret life. It was a secret gift. He had created that alias to funnel more money into the foundation quietly, without recognition, without praise. Robert hadn't been hiding from me. He'd been protecting me. Even in death, he was still shielding our family from the world's ugliness. Juliet had found his shadow, but she'd misunderstood it. She thought she'd discovered a weapon. But all she'd found was proof of Robert's compassion. Still, her threat couldn't be ignored. If she spread that information publicly, people wouldn't care about the truth, only the scandal. I had to protect the foundation. And Ethan. The next morning, I called Carlos. She came, I said. Juliet. She's threatening to go public with Robert's old alias. He was silent for a moment. That could cause real damage if it's misunderstood. I know, I said. But I found his notebook. It explains everything. We just need to get ahead of her. Carlos exhaled. Leave it to me. I'll handle her legally. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Juliet wasn't the type to play by the rules. And somehow, I sensed, this wasn't over. That evening, I went to the foundation to check on Ethan. He was sitting at Robert's old desk, sorting donation forms. Hey, Mom, he said softly when I entered. You okay? You look pale. I hesitated, then forced a smile. Just tired. But inside, I was bracing for a storm. Because Juliet's last words wouldn't leave me. Everyone hides something. And though I'd thought I finally uncovered every secret my husband left behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still one more waiting in the dark. The next morning, the city was silent after the storm. The sky was washed clean, and sunlight filtered through my curtains, soft, golden, almost forgiving. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Robert's notebook. Every page now told me something new about the man I thought I had already fully known. He had carried secrets, not to deceive, but to protect. And now it was my turn to do the same. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Carlos's voice came through, calm but tense. Aurora, we have a problem. I felt my stomach tighten. What happened? Juliet's gone to the press, he said. She sent anonymous emails claiming Robert had offshore accounts under the name Richard Hale. She attached partial transaction records. I closed my eyes. How bad? Bad enough that the story's spreading. But there's still time. If you address it before it spins out of control, we can contain it. We'll need a statement from you. I nodded slowly. Then I'll give one. 2 hours later, I stood in the quiet boardroom of the Hughes Foundation. Ethan sat beside me, pale but composed. Across the table were the board members and reporters, their cameras waiting, their pens poised. Carlos leaned close and whispered, "Ready?" I nodded again, though my pulse pounded in my ears. The lead reporter, a woman in a grey suit, adjusted her glasses. "Mrs. Hughes, are you aware of allegations that your late husband was hiding money offshore under an alias?" I took a deep breath, looked straight into the cameras and said, "Yes. I am aware. And I am also aware of why." The room went still. My husband, Robert Hughes, was a man of quiet generosity. He didn't want fame or recognition. He wanted to help, to build something that would outlive both of us. The alias Richard Hale wasn't a disguise for corruption. It was a name he used to make anonymous donations to orphanages and schools. The money wasn't hidden. It was given. The murmurs began immediately. Flashbulbs flickered. I raised my voice slightly. "I have his handwritten records, all verified, detailing every cent that went toward children in need. If the world wants to question that kind of secret, let it. I will not apologize for a man's kindness being too humble for headlines." Ethan glanced at me, his eyes wet. Carlos exhaled slowly, relief spreading across his face. The reporter hesitated, clearly unsure what to ask next. "So, Mrs. Hughes," she said carefully, "you're saying your husband's alias was purely philanthropic?" "Yes," I said firmly. "And I have proof." I placed the black notebook on the table, sliding it forward. The cameras zoomed in. The pages opened to Robert's final note, the one written in his steady hand. "If they ever question my name, let them find my purpose." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights. Then, slowly, the tone of the room changed, from suspicion to quiet respect. That night, as news of the press conference spread, messages began flooding in. From former volunteers, from orphanage directors, from people Robert had helped decades ago without them ever knowing who he was. One email read, "I grew up in a home your husband funded. Because of him, I finished college. Because of both of you, I believe in kindness again." I sat reading for hours, tears streaming down my face. Every story was a seed Robert had planted in secret, and now, finally, they were blooming. Ethan sat across from me, silent, his eyes glistening. He finally spoke, his voice quiet but sure. "He really was the best of us." I smiled faintly. He was the man I always knew, even when I didn't understand him. Ethan nodded. "Mom, thank you for standing up for him. For all of us." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "No, Ethan. Thank you. For finding your way back." For the first time in years, he didn't look broken. He looked like his father. But life has a way of testing peace the moment you find it. 2 days later, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photo, me, leaving the foundation the night of the press conference, and a note scrawled in sharp handwriting. "Nice performance, Mrs. Hughes. But you can't hide everything forever." No signature. But I didn't need one. Juliet. I felt a flicker of old fear, but it died quickly. She wanted power, and now she had none. Still, I couldn't help wondering, what else did she think she knew? Later that evening, Carlos called. "We traced the email leaks to her apartment," he said. "The police are handling it. You won't hear from her again." I thanked him, but after hanging up, I sat in silence, staring at the window where the rain tapped softly against the glass. For so long, my story had been about surviving loss, betrayal, humiliation. But maybe survival wasn't the end of it. Maybe the real lesson was what came after: rebuilding, forgiving, and choosing peace even when you had every reason not to. A month later, the foundation hosted a reopening ceremony, a celebration of its new chapter. Ethan had worked tirelessly to expand its outreach, partnering with schools and hospitals, just as Robert had dreamed. As I stepped onto the small stage, applause filled the hall. The children's drawings now lined the walls, colorful hearts, smiling faces, and one that simply said, "Thank you, Grandma Aurora." I laughed softly, tears catching in my throat. 40 years ago, I began, my husband and I dreamed of building something that mattered. Not for recognition, not for wealth, but for meaning. We believed that love, when shared, multiplies. And tonight, seeing all of you here, I know we were right. Ethan joined me on stage, placing an arm gently around my shoulders. In his eyes, I saw Robert's quiet strength, steady, kind, unbreakable. When the ceremony ended, I lingered in the garden outside, watching the children play under strings of warm light. The evening breeze carried the sound of laughter, innocent, free, eternal. For a moment, I closed my eyes. And I could almost hear Robert's voice beside me, calm and proud. "You kept your promise, Aurora." I smiled. "No, my love. We kept it, together." Later that night, as the last guests left, Ethan and I walked through the now empty hall. He stopped near a framed photograph of Robert. "Mom," he said softly, "I've been thinking about the future. About the foundation." I turned to him, curious. "I want to dedicate a scholarship in Dad's name," he continued. "For kids who lost their parents, so they can still chase their dreams. I think he'd like that." My throat tightened. "He'd be proud, Ethan." He smiled, then hesitated. "And Mom? About everything that happened, I'll never be able to erase it. But I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to honor what you both built." I touched his cheek gently. "Then you've already begun." We stood there in the quiet for a long moment, mother and son, the last two threads of a tapestry Robert had started weaving decades ago. Outside, dawn began to break. The first light spilled through the windows, painting the floor in gold. A new day. A new chapter. And for the first time in years, my heart was light. A week later, I visited Robert's grave. The air was cool, and the scent of lilacs drifted from the nearby trees. I knelt, brushing my fingers against his name carved into the stone. "Robert Hughes," I whispered. "Husband. Father. Dreamer. And the man who never stopped believing in us." I placed a white rose on the ground, my tears falling softly beside it. "You were right," I said through a trembling smile. The promise wasn't money. It was love, the kind that survives even death. The wind stirred gently, rustling the leaves. And for a heartbeat, I swore I could feel his hand on my shoulder, warm, reassuring. "I'll take it from here," I whispered. As I walked away, I didn't look back. Because the truth was no longer behind me. It was ahead, alive in every life Robert had touched, every child who laughed under the lights, every second chance love had granted us. And though the world had tried to break me, I had learned something unshakable. The strongest hearts are not the ones that never fall, but the ones that rise, again and again, carrying the light of those they've lost. That was Robert's promise. And now, it was mine.